and it's going to take you another 3 weeks to fill the second one, because what was 28% you were hoping to be 60% and it wasn't. So now you've got a delayed shipment, and then you may not sell. Okay, so it's the uncertainty in the timing that's the problem. It's not the cost associated with getting the quality of shipment. All right, so keep that in mind. So let's have a look at number one challenge. Remember, what we have here is number one challenge, 644. Okay, and you know competition is big, cost control is big. What I want to show you now for the next 5-10 minutes is just show you some cuts between those on the eastern seaboard, those inside. Those that have an international customer, those that have domestic customer. Are these challenges different? And also show you some industry differences. Well, actually component differences, because I really focus on the electronics industry only. How many of you are in fashion industry? Anyone? Textiles? Dealing with electronics industry? Anyone? So what type of industry are you representing? Or your clients? Are you working in accounting? Are you in financial services? Financial services, okay. Okay, government. Okay, and anyone else? Okay, pardon? Toys, great, very interesting. Lots of examples on toys, and maybe you can provide some too. What you have on your card, could you just write down in general terms which industry you're representing? Okay, so you don't have to identify yourself, because I want to collect your card and just help get some more interaction going. Okay, just generally financial services is financial services. Okay, you're insurance, are you in logistics, are you in property, whatever industry, just a generic is fine. Okay, manufacturing, that will be really appreciated. Okay, so can I collect these cards please? So that, thank you. You can have them back at any time. Okay, great. Good.
Sorry.
Sure, no problem. Here's a card here.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you. Okay. Okay. Thank you so much. 谢谢. Thank you. Okay, don't worry, I can't speak Chinese. Do you want? There's a card. Okay, thank you. All right. Appreciate you like card. Thank you. Christopher, thank you. Good. Okay, we're good. Excellent. Okay, we're good. All right, so we've got this card. Anyone need more cards? We've got some here. Okay, let me just read out a couple of the questions that are coming up. How to keep relationship with customers with better prices, very interesting. How to do better sourcing in China that can offer longer credit terms. How does Chinese suppliers manage their buyers' business these days versus 10 years in the future or in the past? Versus, where is the next sourcing spot in China? Which part? Actually, that's very what we're getting onto now. Okay. Let me try and answer some of these questions as they come forward. So I really appreciate this. Look, here is the special economic zone, 535. Notice competition is very big, but if we go inland, you see competition is only 3.45%. Here is 14%. See, what you had a hunch before. You said, oh, competition is going to be greater on the eastern seaboard, right? So we all know that. Isn't it nice to be able to see it in the statistics? Like, this is not government data, this is not panel data, this is not archival data. This is real data when we actually talk face to face to hundreds of suppliers and we ask them, oh, what is your number one challenge? Okay, so if they're on the eastern seaboard, okay, yes, competition is up there next to cost control, 14%, 76 out of the 535. Now we go to those inland, we got 3.45% saying competition is number one challenge. Okay, but HR and productivity is a bigger challenge. Now it's 9%. So you go inland, competition is not as a bigger challenge as HR and productivity. And maybe we can understand that with now we have those lower quality rates, and so we understand that there's HR and productivity challenges. So, and we also must understand that we know Foxconn has gone inland, but they face a lot of challenges inland that they don't face in Shenzhen, because when you're working in Shenzhen and you have immigrant labour, then the opportunity cost for that labour is much less. The opportunity cost for us in that labour to work a second shift is much lower. You go inland, now you've got labour that is working, you're going to the labour's hometown, okay? The opportunity cost of us and them to work a second shift is much higher, because they can enjoy a higher quality of life, they're close to their family, they can go home, and they find the value of that much higher. When you're an immigrant and you're 1,200 kilometres away, then you don't mind. It's not as a big a deal to work a second shift. Okay, so there's these things too. So then you go inland, you have less flexibility on the labour side, and that flexibility can be a big thing. It's like Foxconn with the scale that it has. Okay, so we can think about that as the big question I ask: is competition your friend or enemy? Competition's your friend. So if you're a buyer, competition is your friend because it provides transparency and provides you with alternatives if you're sourcing from particular areas in China. Okay, so now let's move on. What about suppliers in Guangdong province? Cost control, technology, innovation. Shenzhen, HR and productivity is a big issue. And that may be partly to do with the declining population of immigrant labour in Shenzhen, and those that are left there are looking for a large quality of life anyway. Shenzhen is growing very, very fast in terms of quality of life. Okay, so and Jiangsu province, and we all know Jiangsu and Zhejiang province up around Shanghai are big issues. HR and productivity is very big. Technology innovation very big in Zhejiang province. Zhejiang province is our province. They make lots of toys. Okay, who's in the toy business? Yes. Okay. So Zhejiang province they make lots of toys up around Zhejiang province, right? Yes. So we've got a sample from there. Ownership differences. What about those that are Chinese owned versus Taiwanese owned, Hong Kong owned, or other? Well, those that are Chinese owned, your cost control 28%. It's the same for Hong Kong. But notice that HR and productivity isn't as big a deal for the Hong Kong owned versus the Chinese owned. HR and productivity is much higher here. And then we go to Taiwanese. Notice the cost control. You ask a Taiwanese-owned company in China, what's your big challenge? Cost control. And partly that could be more of a mindset change. So the whole reason of a Taiwanese company to set up and expand in China is to do what? Have lower costs, right? And when they don't find it, it's totally opposite to their strategy of why they moved, then I can understand why we've got 42% saying that's the number one challenge. Much higher than the average, like the average is only around 30%. So very interesting. Customer differences. What about the largest customer, domestic versus international? If it's domestic, cost control 25%. Here you have competition 15%, HR and productivity 9%. Now we have, if your largest customer is international, cost control is a much higher percentage. Big difference, all right, much higher. Notice, so you work with an international customer, yes, you're going to be under much more cost pressure. We agree with that. Put your hand up if that makes sense, right? Okay, so international customers do put much pressure on. We know the Walmart example, where you've got a boilerplate contract, you either take it or leave it, and then it's cost down, cost down, cost down after that. And that's the same with a lot of the major electronic design companies. Every quarter it's cost down 5%, cost down 5%. If you cannot justify as a supplier why you can't reduce your cost by 5%, your price by 5%. See, cost down from the buyer is we want your price to be reduced by 5%. Okay? And so I talked to Apple, HTC, Toshiba, Motorola, and so what they're talking about is, yeah, that's the general norm in the industry, But suppliers can fight against that by saying, well, look, we're implementing new capability to fit your future product roadmap. And then that's a way of justifying not having to wear that 5% cost down. Okay, so there are strategies that suppliers can take that we're learning through this project, how they can work effectively with major buyers that do have much more power. Okay, and there are so many interesting examples of Chinese suppliers that do fight back in very clever ways, like the one in Taiwan that said to a major buyer in electronic components saying they wanted costs down on the inductors, and this Taiwanese supplier said, well, sorry, this is our price, you can go to the competition, but know that if you go to my competition you're getting a lower quality product than ours. Okay, so how can a supplier have that mentality? Is that a dumb mentality? No. What was special about this supplier was the owner was educated in Canada, came back to Taiwan and focused the strategy and mission on making the best inductors in the industry. The best. And you think, this is a passive component. It's a passive component. How can you differentiate your product from all the other competition? But it's that mentality. It's a strategic mentality that a supplier has, and that can make the big difference when you're negotiating with buyers. Okay, so there's so many suppliers under pressure, and you don't know if they're going to be around in 12 months' time. But there are so many positive stories of suppliers that have a niche market, a focused strategy, and they know what they're doing. They can work with these major international buyers that have much more power than them. Okay? And that's the difference. I think the biggest difference, those that can work and those that can't, are those that have a focused strategy. And so when I talked to a major component manufacturer, major smartphone manufacturer, and I asked them, what's the difference between the suppliers you accept and the ones you reject? Well, the ones they reject are the suppliers that look to become approved. Then they will want to share that approval status to their other clients to try and get business elsewhere, make more profits, then do the IPO and then invest the proceeds in the property. And that's the mentality of a lot of suppliers, and they sort of steer clear of them and they focus on the others that have a focused strategy, know what they want and want to become world class in making a particular component. And it's just a different strategy that suppliers have. Let's keep moving on this. Don't make me talk for 3 hours. Okay, you've got to stop me. Component challenges. So PCB, notice there's about over a dozen different components, PCBs, connectors, switches, batteries and everything. Out of all of them, guess which one the supplier said the number one challenge was, or next to cost control, the number one challenge was quality. Like as a buyer, wouldn't you want suppliers to think in quality all the time? You know, our challenge is to improve our quality. Our challenge is to improve our quality. You'd want them to have that mindset. But where is quality when we look at this? Can we find quality here? Sales growth, competition, productivity, brand building, technology. Where's quality? You want them to think about quality, right? Quality improvement. 1 out of 101, we found it. Great, okay. All right, what about the passive components? Can we find quality here? Is it here? Can you find it? Not even here, all right? Okay, let's go to optical industry. Is quality here? Improving quality. Quality improvement, 1 out of 40. Okay. What about battery and power? Where's quality? Quality improvement. Isn't it? That is big. All right, notice the difference. Notice the difference. Remember, we were talking about 644 interviews in the data I'm showing you here, up to 927 now. I don't think the data will be much different, but I showed you the others. Quality improvement is not big on the agenda if you ask the number one challenge of these companies, except for battery and power. And you can understand that, like battery and power is very sophisticated in many ways because you're merging chemical with electronics. Okay, it's a growing area, and if you don't get that quality right, then there's lots of consequences, including warranty claims and things like that downstream in the products that batteries go into. So we can understand that. But wouldn't it be nice if the suppliers of the other components had that mentality too, of high quality? As a buyer, you want suppliers to have that mentality, but they don't. But there is a nice to see that in the battery industry that is the case. All right, quality improvement is very important. All right, IC switches, so we've got lots there. So let me just stop there for a moment, and now I want to give you, I gave you the China supplier side. Now we're going to switch to what large successful buyers are doing. So can I ask you to grab your phone? Can you all grab your phone? You're allowed to grab your phone. This is the only workshop where you can take your phone out. Okay, I didn't ask you to turn it on, but I turn on this one because this one's very special. This is a copy phone. Okay, this is less than 1/20th the price of the iPhone. Okay, I can turn it on. I think it's got a noise. Maybe run out of battery. It's going to show up there. There you are. Welcome. Isn't that great? So I'm not an agent for this, but this is a copy of the iPhone, and notice you can buy this for 200 Hong Kong dollars. 200 Hong Kong dollars. It's amazing what. It's amazing. You pass that around. All right. It's dual SIM also. It's also got a touch screen, and you can use. All right. That. Okay. So take that. Pass it around. Don't turn it off, otherwise it's going to make that noise again when you turn it off. Okay, so just pass it around. But that's the real iPhone. There's not much. Well, there is a difference. The touch and feel is different. The big issue you need to make, like you cannot sell that in other markets, in other developed countries, because trade practices will say, "Well, hang on, that's a copy of the iPhone." Engineering standpoint, no, it's not a copy. It's totally different, and the look and feel. Like you have to be crazy to think that that's a copy. You try using it, okay, when it comes around to you. But the point of trade practices when you go to Australia, US, and Europe is about as long as if the customer is 1% deceived, then it is a copy. Okay, so you really can't sell that in these countries, but. Having said that, China, Africa, India is the largest growing market now for these type of phones. Very big market, huge market. You're talking about 350 to 400 million units per year now, growing. So why do I talk about that? Because my study of large successful buyers focused on the smartphone industry, where we got to interview Apple, Motorola, HTC, and several other makers in that industry. And we asked the buyers, what is their largest challenge? What is their number one challenge? And you talk to these smartphone manufacturers, their number one challenge is not, out of all of these, which do you think it is? Put your hand up if you think it's hold-up problem. Right, so we're talking about HTC, Apple's, and Motorola. Put your hand up if you think it's risk. Put your hand up. Risk can be everything, okay? Let's make it more specific. What about hold-up problem? What about performance measurement? What about communication? Have you heard of Daya? Daya is a major company that makes fans, computer fans. US-owned company working for Taiwan, manufacturing in China. I asked the CEO, what's their number one challenge? They said communication. Communication between Florida, their head office, and their factory in China. And if they didn't have a subsidiary operating in Taiwan as a bridge, a cultural bridge and a time bridge, it couldn't work. They couldn't work. All right? Monitoring, hands up for monitoring, hands up for forecasts. All right? Forecast is a big one. Forecast is the number one challenge. And in the words of a global operations manager of one of these smartphone manufacturers, if I can get the forecast right, I can manage the supply chain like clockwork. And it's really interesting. We go back to October 2010, HTC just released its new Evo phone. How's that copy? Is it going around all right? Great, excellent. To the US, and it sold millions more. The demand was millions more than what they expected, and so HTC had to go to a second supplier for the touchscreen. So why didn't they have two to start with? Well, they thought one was already enough. That is, Samsung was their major supplier for the touchscreen. That was enough. But they had to go to Sony to actually overcome that bottleneck because their forecast of the market was incorrect. It was way out. It was millions out. Okay. So what was wrong there? Not having two suppliers or getting the forecast wrong? Getting forecast wrong. Okay. These smartphone manufacturers, you look at that phone there, or how many of you got one of these? You got a smartphone? You all got a smartphone, no? All right. So you know there's 150 to 200 components in one of these things? Yes? All right. And you know that, and working with one smartphone manufacturer, we're studying their ordering system of 15 of these components over a period of about 2 years. The average supplier range for each of those components is from 3 to 11. So you do the math, you're talking about 600, 700 suppliers for one of these, okay? So it's big business in terms of how to manage, how to procure, how to manage suppliers. Even with the power they have, they still have between 3 and 11 suppliers for every component, okay? So forecasts are very important. If we can get that, manage the suppliers. We've got a forecast challenge. Here we have the insides of a similar brand of the copy that's being passed around. And so the big difference that you don't know in the copy is that the LCD panel is directly soldered onto the main board, whereas in the Apple it's not. It may be screwed on. So you can drop your Apple iPhone, you can't drop the copy. Well, I realise, because that's the second copy I bought. The first one doesn't work anymore because I keep on dropping it. Okay. Deliberately, I always practice, see how often it works. So when we're talking about from a buyer perspective, let's, we've been going for a bit of an hour. Let's have a break in maybe about a quarter of an hour. What I want to do running up to the next quarter of an hour is let's just recap what we talked about. The whole theme of the last hour was, well, hang on, if we can understand how the supplier's thinking, if we understand their challenges better, then we're in a better position to work with them. Okay, that was the theme. That was the whole angle that no one really has considered before. It's, you know, everyone that ever writes about China writes about how can we exploit China as Westerners, as foreigners, okay? China's there to be exploited, to do business, to make money. How can we make more money, all right? But no one's ever gone in and say, well, okay, how does the party at the other end feel? What is the number one challenge? How are they managing it? And that's, I presented a few statistics on some of those trends with some stories on that. And so that's what makes what I'm talking about unique, because it's a different perspective. And it's something that I can help sources, I can help Chinese suppliers, both sides with, in terms of making their business better. If we look from the buyer angle, then the buyers will first select suppliers, then they may allocate orders, and then finally they'll do monitoring. What do we mean by monitoring? We're talking about people on the ground. And for some of these smartphone manufacturers, we're talking about 500 engineers on the ground in China monitoring suppliers. Okay, monitoring, second tier, third tier suppliers. So you all know in February Apple released its suppliers publicly. Put your hand up if you heard about that. Okay, so how many suppliers did they list in their release? How many? Remember how many suppliers needed to make a phone? We're talking about hundreds, right? Lots, hundreds and hundreds, right? How many did Apple release? 156. Okay, that didn't, and they said, oh, this makes up a majority of our purchase price, which is fine. But when you talk about suppliers that are supplying to the 156, the second tier, third tier, now you're moving into your hundreds. Okay, 5, 6, 700s of suppliers in that whole chain. Okay, so firms like Apple have engineers on the ground to help monitor not just the 156, but the second tier, third tier suppliers. Okay, how do I know? Because I went and talked to the second tier, third tier suppliers. All right, so monitoring is very important, and monitoring in a positive way. Okay, it's monitoring in terms of FAE, field application engineering. That is, engineers coming to site, not just checking, but helping with improvement, helping to overcome problems. Okay, so in a very positive way, I see monitoring practices in that way. So if we ask these smartphone manufacturers, and these there's 6 that I interviewed in very depth. You've got some smartphone manufacturers, got USB, Internet Hub, and MP3 manufacturer. We asked them, when you select suppliers, what do you focus much on? The smartphone manufacturers are focusing a lot on technology, and those that the other type are not focusing on technology, except this one here, the USB, with a manufacturer out of Taiwan. Of course, Taiwan, they always do focus a lot on technology, no matter what. But then we go to the supplier renewal order decision. Remember, we select suppliers, then we have to, we select suppliers, and they become an approved supplier. They become approved. Okay, that doesn't mean you get orders. Okay, and for a lot of Chinese suppliers, they're happy to just become approved, because then they can market it. We are the official, we are an approved supplier for Apple or HTC. And then that helps them get more orders through other channels. Okay, we understand that game. Now, once you become approved, the next step is you get order decisions every month. And like I said, if you're one of the 3 to 11 suppliers, you are sharing the order decision. So ultimately, you want to try and get 30, 40% of that order or more. You're not going to get 100%. It's not normally the case. And the interviews find that. So when we talk to these buyers and we ask them, okay, what do you focus on when you are making the reorder decision? Not many of them are focusing on technology. In fact, that's not a big thing. What is big now is the quality, the delivery, and the cost. The quality, delivery, and cost. Very big. Very big. All right? And so performance monitoring and information sharing is another issue. Remember, selection, order allocation, then we go to monitoring, information sharing. Here's the deal. With these buyers, a lot of them have different selection practices. Supplier selection practice does vary. The smartphone manufacturers, they're focusing on technology. They're focusing on the technological capability of the supplier to match and move with the technology roadmap that the buyer has. That's a big thing, very big thing. Excuse me. Every component is critical. I remember talking to one smartphone manufacturer, and we look at the phone, and I said, oh, okay, so critical. Here we go, we've got our phone, we've got our exhibit back. Great, it's still in one piece. Don't drop it. Oh, sorry. Okay, now, when you look at this, I asked the smartphone manufacturer, I said, oh, so what's critical in this? What about the case? Oh, critical. Oh, what about the battery? Oh, critical. Oh, what about the antenna? Critical. What about the screws? Oh, critical. Is there anything that's not critical? Oh, yes, the packaging. All right, and so the mentality of the buyer is just everything is critical about the product. There's not some, because if you look at the general theory of business and supply chain management, you manage critical components differently from non-critical components. But the reality is some buyers have that mentality that everything's critical. Whether you're supplying a passive component or resistor, an inductor, or if you're supplying a battery, okay, or you're supplying the antenna or the casing. Everything's critical. So Suppliers have to respond to what the buyer defines as being critical. You can't just apply what you learn in MBA to say, oh, I'm a critical component or it's not a critical component. For one buyer it may be critical, for another buyer it may not be critical. So there are things that we're learning through this. Bottleneck components gain additional focus, buyer power and information sharing. So if we have a look at the cost management, how many of you are in accounting? Yes. Accountants, again, you're still alive, great. All right, so we've got to you now. This is cost management. And why is this important?